Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of my Baby Steps series. This video is going to be all about the different acronyms and terms that you might hear if you've ever come across infertility related forums or Facebook groups or websites. Today is again going to be primarily for those that are in the infertility community, but it can also be helpful to know what all of these different acronyms and terms mean, even if you're not. So beginning with TTC. TTC stands for Trying to Conceive. We're often called the TTC community, and if you ever see TTC in a sentence, that's what it means. It just means we're trying to conceive. Sometimes it's used in the context of how long you've been trying to conceive, so I've been TTC for 3 years. DOR, which I've mentioned previously because it's my personal diagnosis, is Diminished Ovarian Reserve. This means that the amount of eggs that you have left is less than what it should be. AMH stands for Anti-Mullerian Hormone, which is again related to my diagnosis. I have a low AMH level. It's basically a hormone that they can measure in a blood test to get a general sense of your egg reserve. BCP stands for birth control pill. The birth control pill is often used in priming protocols in IVF cycles or even in other types of fertility treatment cycles. DPO stands for days post-ovulation. And this is a big one because everyone in the infertility community has probably had some point in their TTC journey where they have been incessantly tracking their cycles. And I'll have a separate video about this that goes more into depth about how to track ovulation, but basically it's used in ovulation tracking. And when someone says they are 10 DPO, that means they're 10 days past their ovulation date, whether that was determined by blood work at the doctor's office or by their at-home tests. I usually start taking pregnancy tests around 7 DPO, which is early, but just for my own peace of mind, I want to find out as soon as possible if it's positive. So DPT is very similar. It's days post-transfer. This is specific to IVF cycles where someone is doing a transfer of an embryo. The calculations are a little bit different. So if you're 5 days post-transfer and it's a 5-day transfer, then that's equivalent to 10 days past ovulation because your retrieval of those eggs that became the embryo was 5 days prior. Does that make sense? So if retrieval is equal to ovulation, then the embryo grows to 5 days, and then that embryo is transferred, and then 5 days later, you're 5 days post-transfer. 5 plus 5 is 10 days post-ovulation. That can get a little more confusing if you're not actually in the TTC community, but that's kind of the gist of it. On a similar thread, FET stands for frozen egg transfer. And this one gets confusing to me because obviously fresh and frozen both start with the letter F. So it took me a long time to figure out that FET stands specifically for frozen embryo transfer. And as far as I know, there is no acronym for fresh embryo transfer, which is confusing to me, but that's what that means. 2WW, or alternatively TWW, stands for 2-week wait. And it's the dreaded wait that we all hate after confirmed ovulation, where we have to wait 2 weeks before finding out if we're pregnant or not. Obviously, if you're taking home pregnancy tests earlier than 2 weeks, and you can find out sooner, but everyone generally calls it the 2-week wait. AF does not stand for what you think it might mean in the infertility community, but in the TTC community it stands for Aunt Flo, which you can probably guess is a cute little term for our menstrual cycle or our period. So when Aunt Flo arrives, it's usually not a good thing and we're usually not happy about it. Unless we're starting a treatment cycle, then that's when it's exciting. BBT stands for basal body temperature. And this again, I will talk more about in another video about ovulation, but it is another method to track ovulation. And it's basically your resting body temp, which is taken a few minutes after you wake up without doing any type of large amount of activity. It can help you pinpoint when you've ovulated like 3 days later. And similar to that is OPK, which is Ovulation Predictor Kit, which is your at-home ovulation test that, you pee on a stick and it tells you whether or not you're going to ovulate within the next 24 to 36 hours. And our favorite test of all, the HPT, is a home pregnancy test. And these are the ones that we're all obsessed with peeing on every single day, or at least I am. Also related to pregnancy tests is either BFN or BFP, and these stand for big fat negative or big fat positive. When we say, oh, I did an HPT 13 DPO and it was a BFN, then basically what I'm saying is I took a home pregnancy test at 13 days after ovulation and it was a big fat negative, sad face. Opposite is I think I got a big fat positive, What do you guys think? You often see these associated with pictures that are posted of pregnancy tests if someone is not sure and they want other people to double check to see if they're not crazy. Yeah, so that's what we're all hoping for, is the BFP. CD stands for cycle day in the infertility community. Each cycle starts on cycle day 1, which is the first day of your menstrual period. Now, getting a little bit into like fertility treatment related terms, we have DO and OE, which are donor eggs or own eggs. And this is an important distinction to determine what type of treatment cycle is happening. For example, some people might use donor eggs if their own egg quality is not good, or if someone wants to specify that they're using their own eggs. I often see people asking like, what are the chances I can get pregnant with my OE, with my own eggs? Then there's ER, which is egg retrieval. That's the day that they retrieve your eggs. And then there's the two big ones, IVF and IUI, which I think I've explained briefly in my What is IVF video, but IVF stands for In-Vitro Fertilization. That is the whole process where you're taking a bunch of injections, trying to grow as many eggs as possible. They remove them from your body and then fertilize them and everything in the lab. Or alternatively, some people do egg freezing and don't go through the fertilization process if they're not ready for that stage yet. Then there's IUI, which is Intrauterine Insemination, or otherwise known as artificial insemination. That's where you're still taking some drugs. Sometimes you can do natural IUIs. Once you ovulate, then you go into the clinic and you have a sperm sample, whether it's from your partner or donor sperm, and then they put that in your uterus through a catheter. MFI is another issue that some couples might have. It stands for male factor infertility. Male factor just means that something to do with the sperm is causing some issues and might be the reason that a couple is not getting pregnant. MC stands for miscarriage. PCOS stands for Polycystic Ovarian Syndrome, which is a condition where you end up having a lot of cysts on your ovaries. And then Endo is just a short form for endometriosis. Then there's also POF and POI, which is premature ovarian failure or primary ovarian insufficiency. And these are various stages of your ovaries' function. So if your ovaries are not producing any follicles anymore and you haven't reached menopause yet or anything like that, then you may be in premature ovarian failure, which means it's something that's happening before it should be. Primary ovarian insufficiency is kind of like the stage before that. Here's two that I like. It's PUPO and PASP. And so PUPO is PUPO, and it says pregnant until proven otherwise. And a lot of people use this after they've done a transfer, whether fresh or frozen, and they say, I am pregnant until proven otherwise, because they technically have a fertilized embryo inside their uterus, and it might implant and it might not, but it's kind of a positive way of looking at the situation and keeping the hope up that it will be successful. In a similar vein, PASP is pregnant and staying pregnant, which is pretty much the exact same meaning, but even like one level higher positivity, like I'm pregnant and I'm staying pregnant. Next up is some common tests and hormones. SA, which stands for semen analysis, pretty straightforward. They give a sample and they do tests on it. US is ultrasound, or sometimes it's referred to as I had a date with Wanda today, because they use an ultrasound wand. It's just some of the silly things that the TTC community has come up with to kind of keep things lighthearted as they can be. For the hormones, we have LH, which is luteinizing hormone. This is the hormone that you're tracking with your ovulation tests. Once the LH spikes, then that means you should be releasing an egg within the next 24 to 36 hours. FSH is follicle stimulating hormone. A lot of the drugs that you take during IVF contain FSH, and this is the drug that stimulates your follicles and makes them grow. PIO is Progesterone In Oil. They are the big scary needles that you have to take as intramuscular shots, and they are used to help sustain pregnancy and also thicken your lining. And TSH is thyroid stimulating hormone, and they check your thyroid to make sure that they're at appropriate levels, because sometimes this can have an effect on fertility. For example, my levels were technically within normal ranges, but they wanted it to be kind of below a certain level for fertility purposes, so I am actually on a thyroid medication. Then backtracking back to the pregnancy tests, we have any variation of VVFL or VVVVV. Typically there's just any varying number of V's in this one, and it stands for a very, very faint line. So if someone says, I think I got a VVFL, then this is another one where they're typically posting a picture to see if anyone else can see what they're seeing, and typically it's the really faint ones that you have to squint at and hold up in the light, and you're not sure if you're going nuts or if you're just, you know, hallucinating this second line because you've taken so many pregnancy tests at this point. So those are all the main ones. I'm sure there are many that I've missed because the infertility community is vast and there's so much information that you get thrown at you right at the beginning and all throughout, then it's a constant learning process. But I hope this kind of sums it up nicely for you, and if you ever come across these terms, then you might better understand what they mean. I will also post all of these terms and their meanings down below in the description in case you need to refer back and you don't have to watch this whole thing again. But thank you so much for watching, and I hope you continue following my journey at lifesbabysteps.com. Bye.